So, have you ever wondered where the Bible really came from? I mean, really thought about it? Today we're diving into a fascinating case made by a theologian named William Hanna Thomson. He called it the Great Argument, and it was his answer to one of the biggest questions out there. Was the Bible written by man, or was there a divine author?
I mean, think about the sheer scale of the puzzle here. You've got this collection of books, right? Written by dozens of different people. Shepherds, kings, fishermen, you name it. And not over a few years, but over a span of 1,500 years. How on earth could they all end up telling one single, consistent, and, let's be honest, pretty unbelievable story? For Thomson, that wasn't just a happy accident. It was a clue.
And that's exactly the clue William Hanna Thomson followed. He became convinced that the answer was hidden in plain sight, woven through the pages of the Old Testament. And he gave his discovery a name, the Great Argument.
And here's where he really draws a line in the sand. He says, if the life of Christ was really written beforehand in the Hebrew Scriptures, then the conclusions as to the truth of the gospel are too clear to be withstood. Basically, he's saying his entire argument lives or dies on this one idea: fulfilled prophecy.
So how does he build this argument? Well, Thomson says it stands on three incredibly strange, almost counterintuitive pillars of prophecy. Let's start with the first one, which is this promise that was just unheard of in the ancient world.
It all kicks off with what's called the patriarchal promise. You know, the covenant that God makes with Abraham and then Isaac and Jacob. For Thomson, this isn't just some ancient story. It's the foundational blueprint. It's the starting point for everything that follows.
And right at the heart of that promise is this one single line from Genesis: "In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Now, just pause and think about that for a second. Not just your family, not just your tribe or your nation, but all families, the whole planet. That was an absolutely revolutionary idea back then.
And Thomson really hammers this point home. He says this idea was totally foreign to how people thought back then. Their heroes were national heroes. They were conquerors who made their own nation great by crushing everyone else. The idea of a universal savior, a hero who would bring a blessing to your enemies, that just wasn't in the human playbook.
So that first pillar, this idea of a blessing for everyone, leads right into this second pillar. If this prophesied hero wasn't going to be a typical military conqueror, then what in the world would his kingdom look like? Well, the contrast is just night and day. On one side, you've got your standard issue, ancient conqueror, right? All about military might, building an earthly empire and the power of the sword. But the prophesied king? He was the exact opposite. His power was supposed to be moral righteousness. His kingdom wasn't of this world, it was spiritual. And his weapon wasn't a sword, it was the word.
And this isn't some modern spin. Thomson points right to the ancient texts. Prophets like Isaiah said this king would strike the earth, but not with a sword. He'd do it with the rod of his mouth and the breath of his lips. It's a kingdom built on influence, on ideas, not on force. And again, Thomson asks, what human writer in that time period would even come up with something like that?
Okay, now we get to the third pillar. And for Thomson, this one is the real kicker. It's the most powerful, the most paradoxical, and the most convincing piece of evidence in his entire argument. The prophecy that this amazing hero would be rejected and that he would suffer.
This, right here, is the absolute linchpin for Thomson. Because from any kind of human, logical perspective, this is the craziest part of the story. A prophecy written in detail about a hero who would be rejected, who would suffer, and who would ultimately be killed by the very people he was supposed to save. Thomson walks us right through the prophet Isaiah's words to build his case. First, you get this portrait of total alienation. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. This isn't a celebrated champion. This is an outcast.
But then, the text gives a reason for all this pain. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. So his suffering isn't because of his own failures. It's for the failures of others. He's taking their place.
And finally, the prophecy climaxes with his death. And it's not a glorious death on a battlefield, it's a shameful one. Quote, "He poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors. He dies like a criminal."
And this leads to Thomson's absolute knockout question. What human author, trying to invent a national hero to rally their people, would ever Write a story about failure, rejection, and public execution. It's the ultimate anti-hero story. Who would make up a Messiah that was destined to lose?
So, let's bring it all home. Let's pull these three pillars together and see how they form what Thomson called his great argument for a divine blueprint.
See, for Thomson, the real power isn't in any one single prophecy that you could write off as a lucky guess. No, the power is in the convergence. It's the way these three incredibly specific, incredibly strange, and counterintuitive themes, a universal blessing, a spiritual king, and a defeated savior, all show up again and again, woven consistently through different books by different authors over centuries.
So his logic kind of boils down to this. Step 1, you have a whole bunch of different authors, separated by hundreds of years. Step 2, against all odds, they write one single, coherent, and frankly bizarre story that no one would invent on their own. For Thomson, Step 3 was the only logical conclusion. There had to be a single, non-human author guiding the whole narrative from behind the scenes.
And that leaves us right where Thomson wanted us to be, facing his ultimate question. Is the unbelievable consistency of this messianic story in the Old Testament, a story that seems to defy all human logic, just one massive historical accident? Or is it, as Thomson argued, a deliberate, divine argument spelled out across the centuries? That's the heart of his thesis, and it's a question people are still wrestling with today.